everybody, and even if you don't have a body. This is Layman Pascal, and you're listening to the Integral Stages Meta Podcast series, where we interview interviewers, broadcasters, and generally promote and explore people who are trying to bring forth higher, deeper, more transformative, or more developmental perspectives through online projects. Today, I'm sitting down and sitting up with Tom from Parallax. He's an author, philosopher, podcast host, and he's working to create and hold enriching spaces for people involved in leading-edge meta-discourses around post-pluralist politics, post-metaphysical spirituality, and post-postmodern possibilities for depth, transcendence, and existential freedom. Hi, Tom.
Hi. Can I use that?
Yeah.
That was amazing. I would put this on my Wikipedia page. That was nice, amazing.
Yes, that's yours. The introduction belongs to the guest. That's my new policy.
Perfect.
You claim to have been born in Germany, but your last name doesn't look very German to me. Am I wrong?
No, well, because it isn't German. You know, it's a nom de plume, if you will say so, or if I would say so. No, it's because I have like this publishing business and my work as a philosopher. And at one point, I just decided I need an artist's name to separate these two kinds of fields of work, basically.
And you pronounce it Amarque or Amarque?
Amarque. The story is that, you know, I was watching a documentary about the first painted, you know, the Bibles, the Celtic Bibles, who had paintings on the, you know, on the pages. And so the one book was, you know, the Book of Celts, and the other book is the Book of Amarque, right? And so, and I don't know why, it's just stuck with me. And then years later, I moved to Spain, and then I learned that it is the subjunctivo of Amarque, to love. You know, or better, like love as an imperative. And I found that very, very funny, you know?
Yeah, that's great. I like that. Let's see. Let's get on track here. Why did you originally start interviewing people? And how do you feel about it now? Do you think you're doing it for the same reason as you started, or has your sense of it changed over time?
Well, I mean, both. Because I started it because I needed to talk to, you know, living on this island here, I needed to talk to interesting people, you know, and enrich my personal life and you know, enrich my horizon on what's out there. And back then when I started, like 5 or 6 years ago, it was, you know, at least in my view, still a fairly new medium, like doing podcasts, and I had no fucking idea what I was doing. I was just starting it, and the first podcasts were really shitty. I learned pretty quick that, you know, that when you do this long form interviews, so after 50 minutes or so, there's the moment of, you know, trust and rapport, and then, you know, that what Viveke calls like dialogos, and then, you know, the new stuff starts to emerge, and that is so enriching still for me today. You know, that's the reason why I do it. Of course, you know, bring, you know, the topics and the work of other people in the foreground. But for me personally, that's still so enriching. But nowadays, it's just like everybody does podcasts now. It's a little bit saturated, I fear, you know, so we have to think of other ways to reach people, I think. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. I think, I don't know what that next thing looks like, but I think we are reaching a point at which it's not special. I think it will keep going. It's right. A normal way to have conversations, and we need to keep having conversations. But there's definitely the leading edge will be doing something different in the next 5 years, I think.
Right. But when did you start?
I guess I started 2 or 3 years ago, even though I had a radio show before that, so I was doing something similar.
Oh, right. You had.
Just in terms of recording, you know, integral meta discourses, probably 2 or 3 years. I lose track.
Right. Yeah, but it was still fresh like 3-4 years ago, you know,
Well, and it's hard to know because it feels to us maybe that it's a lot of it's gone on, but there may be lots of people in the world who haven't even encountered it yet, and it's fresh for them.
You mean the medium itself, or that what we talk about?
What we talk about, like these kinds of, I mean, there must be people still coming in going, oh my God, I didn't know there were conversations like this.
Right. No, I mean, I just had yesterday this conversation, because sometimes I think, you know, because I was just at Emergence, there are like these people, these super sophisticated and super smart people that it's like, sometimes I feel when I do interviews with them, it's not for now. It's like for 300. It's like for 300 years in the future. Like imagine you would like be able to look at YouTube and watch a video of Kant and Schelling or Fichte having a debate with each other. And so when I talk with Alexander Barth or Cadell Last, these are like the people that, will be talked about in a couple of 100 years. I mean, that's my best guess. I don't know that, but it's like sometimes I feel I do it for the future, not for now. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a kind of time capsule-like effect. And I think it may be that some things that are spoken about people who are so rich in their perspectives that it's always going to be fresh. Like sometimes it seems like it's ahead of its time, but sometimes it may be its time will never come. It will always be sort of hovering above the normal discussion.
Certified fresh, my friend. No, it's true. It's like, when the Beatles made their first, the first music videos at all, like what was it, like Strawberry Fields Forever? I don't know. It didn't even had a proper medium. Like maybe they showed it once in the television or whatever. And they couldn't have known in the 60s that there will be something like the internet. Yeah. Like how many people have watched that now? 60 million people, 1 billion people. That's amazing. And that video is still awesome, Yeah,
it achieves timelessness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in these sort of overlapping communities of people that we talk to, what do you think is getting talked about too much that doesn't need to be talked about that much? And what do you think isn't getting talked about enough? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, I would phrase it differently. I think it's like we had the big discussions, and what's happening now is that, like with the tree, with all the branches, and now we have like it differentiated so much that we sometimes lose track of the very, the fundamental questions, and so, I mean, when Wilber did his work and in the 90s, and we talked about this already, and this was like mind-blowing when you first adopted, the worldview that, okay, there are stages of consciousness, right? And I could structure my life according to that, and worldviews and cultures and whatever. But now you find all these little skirmishes and, this little debates, and they're kind of important, but it's very rare that, somebody has a big new thing to offer. And so that would my way of, it's like with the Cambrian explosion of arts, of biological beings. And so there was like, one cellular organisms inhabiting every niche in the planet. And then there was like this new idea, like multicellular organisms. And then this huge explosion of new species and new, biological forms. And so we had this debate, this emergence of this new idea of stages and, being integral and what happens after postmodernity. But now we're like trying to find every niche possible and inhabit every niche possible in our conversations. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think we should be focusing more on trying to, put forward a central message? Or do you think by doing this diversification and occupying every niche that eventually will create the situation in which there, the super predator or the new organism emerges out of that diversity?
I have no fucking idea what we should do. No, really, it's like I'm only driven by my own instincts and what is interesting to me at that particular moment. I mean, like, even if you have like one guy that you're interviewing or one woman, they're like, it's an incredible amount of possible ways you can conduct an interview. Yeah. It's like it's just too much, Psyche and the output of Vervaeke or Thomas Björkman or Alexander. It's just too comprehensive, and then you have to just follow your gut feeling. Won't you agree? It's just like what interests you at the moment.
Absolutely, because first of all, you can only ever get a little piece of them.
Right.
I speak to somebody like Vervaeke a dozen times, and there's still huge areas of his theory that I have no idea about.
Right. Exactly.
And Greg Henriquez. I have to show up and be authentic, and it has to be interesting for me. So I have to just stay with my curiosities in that moment.
Exactly. And so in a lot of ways, I mean, we have like, all the moralizing what we should do. And, we have to be, aware of the stages, and we have to be aware of sustainable, practices, in terms of the environment, and we have to be aware of this and this. And this is, you have this German philosopher, Sloterdijk, who says it's just too much. We can't do all of this. It's just like, it's too much to be expective of us nowadays. And so you have to, look inward and see what's moving you, like from the most authentic point you find within yourself. Yeah.
This is reminds me of Marshall McLuhan said this thing, that 150 years ago, a well-educated person could basically be in command of all the things that he should have read, and now you could not even get 1/10 of a single discipline's information in your whole lifetime. There's no way to get on top of it.
Yeah, and the sacrifice you have to make, that if you want to be good in one thing, it's like, that's what Peterson said, then you're probably an idiot in 99% of the other 99% of your life. And so that's a trade-off. And it's like, I don't know what's better. I think for me to be a well-rounded personality, and well-rounded and know my limits and, but try to be authentic. That's for me the way to go, and not like be too much of a specialist.
Well, let's talk a little bit about young Tom. Was young Tom always interested in philosophy and spirituality, or was there a phase in his life where he started to get interested in those things?
Well, I mean, my father was somewhat instrumental to that, so, because he was like a doctor, and he had like this thing when he came from work, and he had like a room where he would work with like the files of the patients. There was no computer back then, so he had like all the paper files to go through at the end of the day. And he was sitting in one place, and then we were playing this game. He had like this huge library, and he was saying, okay, pick one book, any book. And I was 8 or 9 or whatever, and so I picked like with the chair, like one book out of the thing. And then he said, okay, choose one page, whatever page. And I chose one page, and he said, like, read one sentence. And I did. And then he said, oh, well, that's that book on more or less that page, And that was like, he had like this love of books and Camus and Sartre and, all the philosophers. And, that was like, this is one of the memories that I have about this time that, that I go back to in forms of, what created this.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, but because it was a game,
Yeah.
And so a way of, in that age to connect with my father, because he was just working too much.
Yeah, I like that it involves you making the choices and being active, because, we have kids, and it's too often the case where you're just trying to give them something like they're passive. I'm now going to tell you this thing that I think is important for your life. Right. You need to get them involved somehow. So I like that part.
I mean, at that time, there was no, psychology in that sense, at least not where I was coming from. The doctors were all self-medicating with alcohol. They were all fucking drunks, basically. So the idea that, a doctor could go to psychotherapy, that came like in the 90s, maybe, So, but, he was like an old German doctor, if you will. And so he was teaching me chess, and, and he was really good. And so and he was like dangling the chocolate in front of my face. It's like when you win, you get all of my chocolate. And he had like a huge stack from his clients, that he would never eat. And so he would know how to motivate me, that was kind of fun.
Nice. Who were your early intellectual heroes, or, philosophical or spiritual sources of information that really excited you?
Well, no, as I said, like I started to read, the Frenchies, Camus and Sartre, and Nietzsche, of course, when I came into, into adulthood, like 16, 17, when I when I started to. But again, and I think we talked about that, what really blew my mind was, Timothy Leary, at that time, because that was a way to, an initial way to connect everything, what I experienced within myself and, outside of myself. And I mean, his model of this, stages of the nervous system, it's kind of flawed, but it's the same idea, we still use today. And I don't know if we at some point will find brain structures that connect to certain, stages of development. But, the idea that you can view yourself and your worldviews in that kind of way, and that blew my mind, And then you come in this age, and then you take drugs and, you take LSD and, it's
What is phenomenon verlag, and what does that mean in English?
Well, it means phenomena, a phenomenon. And, I was with some friends. I did a magazine, a mind magazine. And so that was the idea, because I had some money, and so we started a magazine and a printing, publishing business. But we were like 4 guys at that time, and it was like super much, a lot of work. So we were writing the articles and, editing it and typesetting it, and then actually printing that shit and send it out, like 4 guys, no idea what they were doing. And, and we did this for 1.5 years till we, said that this is not sustainable in, no way. And so, but out of that, with the following years, I had the idea to make like a publishing business, like for books. And so I, published like some free books, like translated, which were not costly, like Vivekananda. But then I also like got in contact with like the right holders of Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson, and started to publish their books. And then, from that, Wilber and Alexander Barth now, and Thomas Björkman in Germany. So that's a German publishing house.
When you look back at your own life so far, does it seem to you that you went through something like developmental stages, in that kind of Wilber or spiral dynamics sense? It's a very interesting theory, but in your own life, does it look like that's kind of what happens?
If I put on that glass, when I put on those glasses, of course, it's hugely important for the ego to have this perspective, I don't know. I don't want to cop out of the question. It's like, of course you can take a look at yourself in this kind of way and look at the phases you went through your life. But then on the other side, I still feel like I'm 17 inside. And I feel like I fear that when I'm 92, if I ever get to reach that age, I will still feel like 17 inside. So it's like a question of, it's I don't like those things. If somebody else says, okay, maybe that's a postmodern thought, or you're using a modern narrative, it's like, okay, probably, it's like you have to take, if like the Louis C.K. like the Louis C.K. joke, if everybody says you're an asshole, you can't just say no, right? And so it's like when the people saying, oh yeah, that's postmodern, then all right, maybe it's postmodern. And if somebody say that's traditional, oh yeah, but to do this with yourself or treat it as a religion, like I'm integral, I find that kind of silly, because it's just a tool in a way.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I find it very tricky, because I think there's a part of me that feels like I'm just a young, excited person. And my father tells me that's how he feels.
Right.
He's confused when he looks in the mirror because he still feels like he's 16.
Right.
At the same time, there's a part of me that feels like I've just always been the same way since I was born, or maybe even before I was born. And I don't know if that's a true perception, or if however I am now just projects back all the time.
Right.
It makes it seem like there's continuity. And yet I also feel like I went through some real changes, and I'm not sure if those changes are exactly like any of the developmental models I've seen.
Right.
I want to think freshly about, for me, what was it really like? Whether the models are correct or not. What were my changes from my point of view?
That's super interesting. You know what kind of model I still use is that, you know, the original model of Alvin Toffler that, you know, Timothy Leary was referring to. It's like you have these ways of becoming aware, you know, these ways of coming online in a kind of way. And those are actually moments that I can remember when I came online to certain experiences or certain, you know, ways of looking at the world, but they don't really fit onto like this eight stage model. It's you know, it's complicated, you know, but I know that when I was like 17, there was something happening, and there was like a becoming, you know, online for a certain type of reality, you know, or like when you have like this deep state meditations, and, you know, it's like you struggle for years to get to, let's say, for argument's sake, to get a stage to like you know, samadhi of something, and you struggle years to get there. But once you are there, you know, you became online, or, you know, aware of this thing, then suddenly it's easy to get there again. You know, I don't know if you know this kind of experience, but of course it's like it doesn't go away, you know, and that's, you know, somewhat closer to my personal experience, like these waves of becoming aware or online to certain facts, let's say.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think we need a variety of models of stages, but there's no reason to think any of them are quite match up with our actual experiences, or that we all go through the same ones necessarily. They seem to be much more fluid. I mean, some of them seem to be, it seems to me that my perceptions stay the same, but my immediate sense of what my perceptions mean have changed. And they've often changed based on, like you say, coming online, like being able to access, say, sexuality, right? And
right.
After that, it was always there as part of what this means, even though this used to still look the same.
Right. And I mean, still, like when I was like 12 or 13, I was an automaton in a way. You know, I was just acting out stuff without any reasonable control about my inner life, you know? That's what it is.
Do you have any children?
No.
To me, that's a very interesting place to inspect these things, because you get an idea and you're like, oh, maybe this is how it works.
Right.
And then you have some test subjects in the house.
Right. No, of course.
You can look for the information and see, oh, okay, is that really what's happening or not?
Yes. Yes, super interesting. Yes. I mean that's what Piaget did, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, do you have kids?
My girlfriend has children from a previous relationship.
Okay.
So they've basically been in the house for a couple of years now, and
right.
we have maybe a half a dozen godchildren of various kinds.
Okay.
I don't have to do all of the parenting, but I get to make interesting
the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. You made the mistake of not being born in America, and so some of your books are not available in English.
All right. Yeah.
And so I thought
I made the mistake. Yes.
To help people who are watching this get more acquainted with you is maybe go through some of your writings and just get a few ideas. And I got a list off the internet. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it lists like 10 or so books you've theoretically written.
Yes.
So I'll just throw out some titles and tell me sort of what it's about and what you were trying to do there.
Right.
How about The Evolution of the Psyche?
All right. Yeah, that was my first attempt to write about actually the stages of Toffler, and apply them in a more constructive way to the psyche. So the idea was that you have, the initial idea was that you, with the waves, you develop kind of different observer stances. So like you develop awareness about instincts, about hunger, right? And about, you have to move, or you have to go to the bathroom, whatever. Like you got an instinct, you got an idea, possibility of your body moving within the world. And then out of that, and so we share that with animals. And out of that, through whatever mechanism, comes the second wave of becoming aware, where we get aware of our social environment and social rules. And, still at the end, postmodernity, that the awareness, the insight that everything is socially constructed. This is still being part of the, second wave of becoming aware. And then it's like the third one that Toffler also predicted is like this, not the social turn, but the cognitive turn, that you become savvy of dealing with the autopoiesis of your own mind, right? And that we get more in tune, with that which is yet still unconscious, and know how we construct the world that we experience, the inside world and the outside world. And so you have like these different waves of becoming online. It's interesting that, that we talk about this, but that was the idea.
I'm curious about it being such an early text because, I love Nietzsche's autobiography, Ecce Homo, because part of that is he reflects on each of his books. It's
right.
Very interesting. And when he thinks back to his first book, The Birth of Tragedy, he agrees with a few things about it, but it feels too romantic to him, feels too influenced by Wagner to him. So
right.
I wonder, when you look back on the first one, how are you different from the guy who wrote that? How would you approach it differently if you were doing it now?
Oh, I was way too aggressive about this. Like, I had so much pressure, and it's a very hard German language that I, kind of consciously chose, because I was 25 and I wanted to do this. And I was like, my head was so much full of ideas and I needed to find the structure to bring this into paper. And so like now I would be like way more patient and maybe smart about this, but it was like when you have with 25, it was just too much. And in a way, I like that. I still like the stringence. Is it an English word? The aggressiveness of it. In terms of, I wasn't using. I didn't take care that it is good read. That it's a good read. I wanted to get the theory across. And so by the years, I got softer in my writing, I would say, and therefore a little bit more complex, I would say, but I don't know.
What about a book called The Will? And also, like, these are the English translations. So yeah. I'm also curious if you think any of these are like good English translations or whether the English translation is bad. I'm always curious about that. But
The Will. It's that was an idea that, the idea was that if consciousness develops and if there are lines of consciousness and if there is something like love which evolves through stages and gets more inclusive and bigger. So what happens if we model will and volition in that kind of sense, that you have like an instinctive, say pre-modern kind of acting out volition and will, and then like a egoic kind of way, like what modernists and even postmodernists are doing. Or if you have like a transpersonal, transegoic kind of conception of will, where it's more, where you're more the vessel of something that wants to, emerge or wants to appear. And so I wrote about like eight stages of will, if you will. That was the idea of that book.
That's a great concept. I think a book like that needs to exist, in my view.
Right. Yeah, well, I thought so too.
Nietzsche's famous for the phrase, try to become who we are. Looks like you wrote a book called How We Became Who We Are. All right, yes. What was that one about?
Oh my God. That was a book I wrote because a publisher approached me to write a very easy overview on stage theory. That was basically it. It was, in retrospect, there was nothing new in there. It was probably at that point the best written book, but there was no new stuff in there.
Just a summary of.
Yeah, something like this.
Development as a passion.
Oh yeah, that is one of a book that. Okay, the idea, what happens if you start. So we talked about these waves of becoming aware and becoming online, and so you get an awareness about what the autopoiesis of your own consciousness, how that works, right? And how this autopoiesis, this process of self-creation, leads to the realities that you observe in a kind of way. So what happens if you create a process of development out of that? So the idea was, a process model of development. That's the idea. Sure. So it's like, do we need meditation, for example, if we can use our mind in the right way? Because when we are doing meditation right, the mind is doing something specifically to transform itself. And so, but if you know what that process is, you don't need these externalized techniques. You know what I mean? So then you can.
What is it that makes it work when it works? And
exactly. And then when you know what it is that makes it work, then you can apply to everything what you do. Yeah. And so I devised this kind of process where you can, like the step-for-step process where you can inhabit and, this kind of, bring this autopoiesis of psyche alive.
This, I think, is, in a way, from one point of view, the science fiction point of view, this is what we need, is like a computer system that knows how that thing works and can just have a profile of you and tell you what version of that you should try at any given moment that would maximize your progress. Right.
Yes. But, I looked at, because the idea that I had is like, okay, what do we know about the world? Let's say in terms of evolution, right? And so like what Darwin said and Kaufman said. And so like we have a pretty good understanding of, how the biology and the evolution of the species works, long-term and short-term. You like Darwin having this long-term understanding and observations about species, and Kaufman, the spontaneous emergence, like what we talked about with the Cambrian explosion of art. So my idea was, okay, what if that is an externalization of something that goes on in the mind, right? And so what if, this is actually a process that is applicable to the mind? So you have, say, I hope I do get that right. You have selection, variation, novelty, emergence, novelty, and reproduction. So what if you just start with reproduction? You reproduce your behavior. You start to meditate, right? And then you select new behaviors. You create some variations. You go to the edge of chaos, so to speak, and then you actually kind of produce a kind of novelty, a new emergence, through which novelty can arise in the short term. And so you have a process there that you can apply to the consciousness itself. You know what I mean? It's difficult to explain that in English.
I think I do know what you mean, and it's, I think, always going to be difficult to explain.
Right.
It's a very complex process.
Right.
Yeah, we have to be able to. I'm going to ask you some questions about chaos later, so we can come back to the abstract points there. What am I thinking of? Plato's Symposium. I love that book. I did a translation of it because I like, first of all, the structure. It's very meta-referential. It has all these layers just in terms of the play that he wrote.
Right.
Socrates is at this dinner, and everyone at this dinner has to say what they think love is before they start drinking.
Right.
Right. So you have an anthology called What is Love? It reminds me of Plato's Symposium.
Right. Yeah, that is one of the favorite books I ever published, because that was just an idea like, how do we get, how do we get different perspectives on love in one anthology? And so I was like actually speaking to the Vatican, because the Pope, I wanted to have the Pope contribute a piece, and you have Andrew Cohen had a thing, and the neurobiologist had an essay, and so like different stages, produce different kinds of perspectives on love. And so my idea was like to have an integral, thing on love, and that was a monstrous project, but I love that book. It's just Ken Wilber wrote something for that, and I spoke to the foundation of Eric Fromm to provide a piece of his book, The Art of Loving, I think it is in English. And so it's like it's a great book on love, I think. Still, I love it.
Wonderful. What about a novel called Adept?
Yeah, that was my attempt to write a novel. Let's leave it at that.
Okay, let me ask you this instead. In terms of writers of fiction, who do you admire? Who, if you could write fiction the way you would like to write fiction, who would it sort of sound like? Who do you think is a great novel writer?
Oh, my favorite, of course, is Dostoevsky. I love Dostoevsky, and just if I want to amuse myself, I read Henry Miller and people like that. But Dostoevsky is just fantastic in terms of, he's the pinnacle.
Yeah, it's
literature.
Dark and funny and deep and philosophical all at the same time. I
Yes.
always say it's like Fight Club to me. If the movie Fight Club, where you hear the narrator's voice all the time, right? When I read Dostoevsky, that's who I hear is Edward Norton from Fight Club.
Right. Yeah, sure. The mood is somewhat the same. It's true. No, but it's like I don't know. It's just unachievable. It's like when you, especially when you try to write a novel, then you have to contend with beauty and aesthetics. Something that you can perfectly evade if you write something, non-fictional. It's like, but as soon as you start to write a novel, it's like, and then it's like, oh shit, that's really complicated to write a beautiful sentence, to construct that, and I can declare I failed miserably.
How about narrative awareness?
Right. Yeah. That book was an idea that came, out of the idea that, we're just navigating within memes and narratives, and so the idea was how can we use that for our advantage? How can we grow a narrative awareness? So it's like, and especially now where you like bombarded with different narratives from the mainstream media and from social media, and it's like all this like fake news and propaganda on one side and facts on the other. It's complicated. It's a mess. But sometimes, to be aware and because you must know this experience from meditation. So something occupies you, right? Let's say something, from your daily experience. You go into meditation and you can let it, you can let it go. But then you notice that there's another narrative that you were living, which you're kind of embedded in. And it's like, and it's kind of structured your way, your last week or your last month or whatever. Right. And then you do your breathing work or whatever you do, and then you can let it go. And then you have like this moment, and then you notice, oh shit, there's another thing. It's like even deeper. And so you're like embedded in nested narratives, which help you to navigate through life in a kind of way. And so the idea of the book was, okay, how can I grow an awareness of these narratives I'm embedded in, that I'm choosing and that sometimes chosen for me, and how can I become savvy? Is savvy the right word?
Yeah.
With narratives. That was the idea of that book.
That's nice. Savvy is a beautiful, I think, English word. It's because I think it's sort of like the ancient Greek notion of intelligence, like like Ulysses. Like it's not just I'm smart, but I'm smart in a way that I know how to do something with something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a playful character about it.
Yeah.
Because you can't do this in a mechanical way. Because it's so fluid. You have to be playful about it, and then it's somewhat fun. And it's like the same what you do or what we do with the podcasting. We're playing with narratives.
I'm curious about recently in my discussions with Vervaeke and Greg Henriquez and Greg has this interesting model of like justification space, which is basically all the narrative options.
Right.
Sort of developmental stages, however we think of them, they would be in there as large zones of narrative space. But we've also talked about the sense of a post-narrative option, because people like Kierkegaard and people like the Zen patriarchs, they're talking about using an intensity of paradox to kind of project you into a place where you no longer seem to be part of the narrative realm at all.
Right.
So I'm curious what you think about that, and whether you think that's a special kind of narrative, or do you think it really goes outside of narratives?
No, I mean, there are different words for that, but you have to inhabit a place of, a non-structured place of chaos from which you can choose the narratives, and I don't know if Greg Henriquez talks about this, but it's like there is this chaos. There's chaos and there's order, and in between are all these narratives that are intermediary, and so you have to inhabit a narrative free space to be fully become savvy with the narrative realm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about pluralism or postmodernism. It doesn't always make sense of the world adequately, but at least it understands that there's multiple narrative possibilities, and you move between them. And as long as you can move between them, you are encountering some kind of extra space that isn't within a narrative.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just a narrative. That's the point.
Yeah.
If you start to think that there are levels and stages of development, then you have made a grave mistake.
Yeah.
Because it's like you can't observe them. Nobody has ever observed a stage of development.
What about War of the Soul?
Okay. Yes. The War of the Soul. There's an English translation of the book, The Will to Transcendence. And the idea was, give me a second to dial into this. So my question was, given the fact that we have consciousness, right? Evolutionary speaking, what advantages did come with consciousness, right? Like, generally speaking, these are not a lot of things that a person can do. Like, what are the major advantages of having consciousness, like being aware? And so, of course, you can manipulate the environment. You can create fire. You can build a car or like a wheel or something. And so let's coin that the technical realm of our understanding. The second thing is what you can do. You can create representations of what you're observing. Let's call that art, the realm of arts, right? All these realms, we can inhabit, but not animals, right? And so there's a third realm that we can inhabit, and this is like when we think about social strata, about culture, about our interactions. And let's call it the realm of ethics. But then there's a fourth one, a fourth realm that comes with consciousness when we start to observe consciousness and the rules of consciousness itself. Let's call it the realm of, let's say, spirituality, religion, psychology. So, and these are like the four realms that, that we suddenly can inhabit with consciousness. So what religion, and so I looked at that realm and looked what are the common elements of the religious and spiritual traditions from the moment we booted up our consciousness. Yeah. And so the basic idea of that book is that there are two techniques that gets, mentioned and translated and in every religion and every spirituality. And the first one is the battle with chaos. You have to strive to the new. You have to leave your comfort zone. You have to whatever, and then you have to do the sacrifice. And I identified these two anthropo techniques as, you know, the main techniques of personal growth and development. So that was the idea, to look at spirituality from this point of view. I don't know if I make many sense, but because it's like I have to jump from one book to another. It's like, yes.
No, I think we're just trying to give people a flavor.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But did I make any sense? You have to tell me.
So. Like, I think what you're describing is a little bit like what Wilber and others describe as different lines of intelligence.
Right.
And so when we become human beings, when we become self-reflective, narrative beings, right from the very beginning, we have certain capacities that are going to be in play. Now, I'm curious whether, because you're saying that spirituality is one of these four main ones that can develop, I wonder if you sometimes think of it as a more basic one that the other ones require, or do you think it's just there's a basic set? Like, sometimes I think of spirituality as a particular technical capacity, a particular anthropotechnics. Sometimes I think of it as the underlying one that gives birth to the others, that the other ones require it already.
Right. First of all, so what maybe I have to mention this, what I tried with every book is to exclude Ken Wilber. Yeah. Because I love him to bits. He's great. He did so much for my own development, and, but in terms of my own books, I had to, I could not include him in any way because of his language, because of the implications of it, and because I needed to develop my own language and my own models. And so, yeah, you can overlay lines and, let's say, the four realms somewhat, but I mean somewhat the same and somewhat a different thing, because if you look at what you do when you are aware, let's talk about this in terms of becoming, waves of consciousness. Suddenly you're becoming aware who you are, where you are, what kind of situations you're in. And so let's talk about, what can you do with consciousness? You can make representations of your world. Let's call this art in one way or the other. You can manipulate it, or you can think about social, communication and interactions. Let's call this ethics. And I think just the movement, just to think about consciousness itself, is just another movement. Suddenly the consciousness is able to do it. It's not higher, it's not deeper. It's just another movement. The process that the consciousness is able to produce, basically, and so that's what I mean. It's I don't think it's prime. I don't think spirituality comes before art. That wouldn't make any sense to me in that sense, because, like, when you look at the earliest burial rites and caves, there are you find all the four elements already there. You find the spiritual element, the artsy thing on the walls, and you find everything there.
Do you think we've in some sense, I think this is a really interesting way to describe it, right? Is that from the very beginning of whatever the operating system is that we call consciousness,
right?
At least these four modules are already in play from the very beginning. Right. Do you think we've added any since then?
No, we differentiated those four realms, but there are, test me, like, what other realm is there except technique, ethics, art, and spirituality? You can subsume everything under these four realms or ways of experience the world.
When I read this book, and thank you for sending it to me, The Will to Transcendence, I felt like I kept thinking of Sloterdijk.
Right. Yes.
And, what's your impression of, what's your relationship to Sloterdijk? What do you think's important about him?
The important thing is that I, for years now, tried to make an interview with him, and he declines, and that bugs the shit out of me. That is what I'm thinking. He's the greatest living German philosopher, and I've read all of his books, and they are amazing. I don't know how they translate into English, but he's such a master of language and of modeling, and it's just amazing what he does. The Spheres trilogy and all these books.
I got into Sloterdijk through Bruce Alderman because years ago I would say something and Bruce would say, "Oh, that sounds like Sloterdijk."
Right.
See something else, he'd go, "That sounds like Sloterdijk." I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna read this."
Right. So which one have you read?
I've read some of Spheres, and I've read several times. I've read the one that in English is called The Art of Philosophy.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's like,
and also some. I can't remember. I read some online things that he wrote about Nietzsche, but I don't remember the titles off the top.
Yeah. No, he's a giant. And because in certain ways he comes from the same place Wilber is coming from, let's say the integral stage or whatever. Sure. But he has like a traditional philosophical approach to this, and he's, I don't know, he's just amazing.
The playfulness and the poetry of his language is very beautiful as well.
Yeah. And he was like, and to his benefit, he spent, lots of years in spiritual communities. So he knows exactly what he's talking about when he talks about spirituality and religion and all of this. So because he has like firsthand experiences in all of that, and that sets him somewhat apart, from, the Frenchies from the 60s and 70s, because, because he has a complete, inclusive and integrated, model of the world. And so his idea of anthropo techniques is, what he does in his books, like in one of his books, it's called Du musst dein Leben ändern. In English, it would be something like you have to change your life. Mm-hmm. And it's like the idea you have this process of autopoiesis. And how do you, bring that, how do you embody it in a kind of way, and he says, like, everything you do it because you want to create circumstances the next time that are better, so you can train better the next time and create better results.
His focus on pragmatism or practice, is really important. And I think today, because we inherit from the last few hundred years this idea that you can go to school and become an official doctor of philosophy.
Right.
We sort of lose touch with the idea of what philosophers were in the ancient world, which were more like yogis. They were practicers.
Right.
The main thing they wanted to do was not to tell everyone else their opinion, but to change themselves through a certain application of thinking.
Right. That's why I love Alexander Barth so much, because he's a classical, that would be like the wrong word. He's like a playful philosopher who just, delves into ideas and, and fosters all these people. And it's just amazing what he does. It's I don't know. It's really fun to be with these kinds of people. It's like not, free thinkers, like actually free agents that are able to, generate new content and new ideas and challenge old paradigms, let's say.
Well, let's dig into the way you think of the idea of chaos, because it's very broad. It seems sometimes it's, disruption in that sort of Jordan Peterson sense of chaos.
Right.
Sometimes it's like nirvana, in the sense of like a Buddhist alternative to the ways that we make order out of our perceptions.
Right.
So that's a very big range. When you think of chaos, what do you want that word to mean?
Well, in that book, The Will to Transcendence, I fall back on one of this Hindu texts where they explain that there's not one samadhi, let's say, but like 7 or 8 different. And there's this, let's say, medium samadhi where you conceptualize everything as emptiness, right? Which means, in a kind of way, it's still a form, that emptiness is still a form. But then when you follow these ancient texts, they describe the last samadhi as a form of non-conceptualizing anything. So it's a basic form of chaos where you're not, putting any form or distinction into it, And so sometimes I refer in the book as chaos as this, and sometimes as a symptom, I think that's a term from Lacan where he says like these events that don't fit any of your worldviews and narratives, and it's like those strange things that remind you that your worldview will ever be incomplete, And so I'm aware that I'm not 100% consistent with my use of chaos, because I don't know if you can even do that, because I don't know.
It would be against the very nature of chaos if you could have a very consistent definition of
it. Maybe that's it. Yes. No, it's true. It's true.
I heard one time Terence McKenna discussing what he thought the difference was between, how he thought of meditation and how he thought of the psychedelic experience.
Right.
And he was thinking of meditation as a way of sort of calming and tranquilizing the mind. And he thought of the psychedelic experience as a way of, he called it perturbing the mind, creating turbulence that you then had to integrate. Now that seems to be very core to part of your understanding of the spiritual function of consciousness, right? To encounter some chaos and then to be able to do something with it. So what do you think? What do we do? How do we successfully encounter chaos rather than just be disturbed by it?
I I wouldn't say we have to meditation is to get calm, because I think
I wouldn't agree with McKenna's definition either. But
so because I think lots of the spiritual bullshit that is out there, the Instagram people who meditate and all these communities, it's like, no, it's not meditation. It's not about being calm. That's not what it is. It's a very turbulent process, actually. It's like, of course you try to get deep into the core of what you are and get rid of all the narratives, but this is like it's a hardcore I don't even find the words for the violence of that process, and then there are these moments when you when there's a shift, and and you can leave all that behind, and you leave all the processes behind that constitute the ego and yourself in the first place, right? But it's still a violent process when done right, I would say.
So would
you agree with it?
Do it right, like. In terms of chaos and disruption and something that's outside of our ordinary patterns of making order, other than simply encountering that, how do we do it right? How do we make that useful as part of our spiritual growth rather than merely as something that distresses us?
You mean, how do we confront chaos, or what?
Yeah, how do we make chaos useful to us?
Through the sacrifice. Because it's a two-sided coin, if you have, it's like spirituality and religion, it's always about domesticating the future. I mean, just think of, the idea that there are like ghosts and demons and spirits and gods, like, okay, let's call on Demeter, just, to have like a better crop next year. That's an effort to domesticate the future, but you have, that's approaching chaos by setting out, it's like what Peterson also said, let's have a star, let's log into a fixed star in the future, and then we have to do the proper sacrifices to reach that star. And then the chaos will come, because if you let go of the things you like because you sacrifice them, otherwise it wouldn't be a sacrifice if you don't like the things that you're about to sacrifice. No, you have to like them. You have to, you have to sit in school for 13 years, and then you have to sacrifice time and libido and joy and everything, and then you become whatever you want to become. If you want to have children, you have to sacrifice your time and your well-being and your health and whatever. And so it's like the ritual is the same, but the content is different. But the ritual is if you have to choose a guiding star, and then you have to sacrifice, and that's how you call on chaos, and that's how you domesticate chaos. And that is what Nietzsche said, with you have to have a dancing chaos within you to have a dancing star. And that is what Sloterdijk said. It's the eternal truth is always the same. It's I'm not saying anything new, it's like the idea is just, get rid, it's like choose any point and then sacrifice.
Okay. Nicely said.
What do you think about this?
I think that's I think that that structure you're describing of an aspirational target, which then puts you in confrontation with chaos,
right?
And then the need to sacrifice, or sometimes I think maybe self-struggle is another way of saying that,
right?
Because you have to, and that brings, in my mind, what that does is it puts different parts of us in touch with each other. Because the part of you that wants to do the sacrifice and the part of you that doesn't, which because it likes the thing,
right,
they disagree, and you allow them to disagree, and so you're allowing them to touch each other,
right?
So in a way, you're allowing a higher order of organization and coherence to emerge if you can stay there and let them disagree with each other to the point where they smooth out and become more coordinated in yourself.
Right. Yeah, because like a goal is something by definition that you haven't achieved yet, and so it is outside of the daily narration of yourself. And then by declaring a goal or a guiding star, you're invoking chaos, because you're putting into question your own processes and your own narration, and that hurts. And then you have to get rid of the boundaries that you set for yourself, in order to reach that guiding star, And so, and that is my critique at the, for the spiritual community, that she is not phallic in that way, that she's all like plain level field, it's like let's just sing and do our mantra, but there's no guidance, there's no phallus there, like there's no metaphysical phallus there to, which is necessary to transform.
Yeah, I think you have to try to do something.
Right.
And that's a lot of what you might call postmodern spirituality, I think, falls into this trap of not wanting to try. And it might say, well, my everything I want will just magically show up. I don't have to try.
Right.
Or it might say, well, I should just stop wanting things altogether. I just let go of, right? And those all are they approach a homeostasis,
right?
Which is the opposite of being transformative.
Right. Exactly. No, I know so many people who are like in spiritual communities, and they're like bohemians, like trying out this new constellation technique and this new therapeutic technique and they do this for years and years, without end, without actually transforming themselves. And then you have to ask, what is not working there? Why although all the techniques have, a transformative potential, they are not actually transforming. And so what is going on there?
Yeah.
And that's why that's why I'm always drawn to will and volition and all those things.
Yeah, I think there are some concepts from traditional spirituality that we've sort of lost track of in the last 100 years. And the will is one of those, as well as, I think, remorse and evil and sin and these very charged words that used to be a big part of the discussion. We now sort of put them aside. And I think we should bring them back in to challenge ourselves. Yeah,
that's true.
No, I was going to ask you. No, you go ahead. I've got a question in my mind, though. It could be
no, but it's like at the Merge Festival that was held in Berlin, there was just this beautiful moment just right in the beginning when the presenter, asked the audience, okay, so let's now talk to the cynic in all of you. And so what does the cynic says about all of this here now? And so, and the people were precise, it's like, oh no, we don't like this and we don't like this. And that's because it was suddenly allowed to voice that.
Yeah.
And everybody was alive suddenly, awake, and the room was charged, and it made you think what would happen in an event like this when, you have like a hot ritual there, you integrate art and sexuality in those events, that would be lovely when it's not just a, like a conference setup, but, if you can integrate, a little bit of sex magic there.
Well, I was going to ask you something about group dynamics. Maybe we could come back to sex magic in a minute, but there's different ways of creating a shared experience together, right? Some are very enlivened and very exciting, very transformative. And then some are very dull or very passive, or they kind of give you a positivity, but they put you to sleep. And some are very manipulative. And so I guess there's a question around, like, how important is establishing a good we space?
Right.
Versus how important is it to make sure that the individual's spiritual growth and autonomy is kept preserved and doesn't get absorbed into somebody's notion of collective space?
Right. I mean, we're going full circle here, because that's, what for me, podcasting is about, because those people I interview or that you interview, these are like highly evolved, sophisticated people. And it is such a joy, coming from that place to, have these conversations and wait, for the dialogues, for something new to emerge, that is the beautiful thing, but it is also goal-oriented in a kind of way, but if you don't have that, if you just have a we space without a goal, then people just sharing, their emotions or whatever. It's like I won't say that I have an aversion against that, but the problem is that, you have, and I had this debate with Tom Steininger, that you have to come as an individual from a certain place to enact meaningful in a proper we space, and you can't circumpass, from a postmodern stage to a, say, turquoise stage without having the agency-driven integral stage where you like being like a self-authoring or like an autonomous person that knows how to access this kind of spirit, let's say.
Yeah,
what do you say about this?
There's a phrase from Gurdjieff, which is to be a real altruist, you first must be a real egotist. So that most of us are not focused enough on establishing for ourselves enough inner richness and beingness and autonomy, so that we don't have that in order to join it together with others in a kind of communion.
Right.
You have to have something to bring to the communion first. Otherwise, the communion will be at the lowest possible level. It might even be subhuman. And then you get like a weird cults and things that make people worse by joining together.
Right. I mean, let's not forget that, Suzanne Cook-Reuter and, the original color coding from Spiral Dynamics indicated that there are always stages that are more community driven, and there are stages that are more individual agency and driven. And so you have like red and orange and yellow that are highly individualistic by nature, and then you have the other ones that are from its tendencies more communal driven, and that is perfectly fine. But you can't go from green, let's say, to after yellow without inhabiting this high agency driven. I'm becoming aware of my own narration and autopoiesis, without inhabiting and embodying that. And so, I think it's, I think postmodern we spaces are kind of useless, actually. And I think if you are integral, and then you're automatically looking for like-minded people where such we spaces emerge. And for that reason, the whole idea of like practicing we spaces is absurd from my point of view, because of that argument. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a real we space should emerge more or less spontaneously.
Exactly.
If people are individually ready, and if they're not individually ready, then you're not really going to get one anyway. You're going to get some bizarre, grotesque version.
Exactly.
Seems like a lot of it has to do with the ability to integrate and appreciate our own aggression. Right. That's one of the things that postmodern spiritual communities have not really been very good at. There's a lot of so-called postmodern culture where people either pretend that they have no aggressive impulses,
right?
They're just worried about other people's aggressive impulses,
right?
Or they think they have a duty to aggressively attack anyone who represents aggression in the culture.
Yeah.
And none of that is of saying, I just have this energy. It's part of me, part of my individuality. Even that what you were saying about the inner cynic, right? It's okay and good for us to disagree and criticize and to recognize that about ourselves and to have that energy with us.
Of course. Yes. I mean, like we are all mentally disturbed in some form or another. You know, it's like we all have our traumas and pathologies and dark sides. And I mean, that's just part of the game, I think. And we have to deal with that in the proper manner, I think. And aggression is always great, you know?
Yeah. Makes you strong and warm.
I get all warm and fuzzy inside my belly, you know? It's like, yes, let's punch somebody.
Yeah, I remember my younger brother got in trouble at school for throwing rocks at some seagulls at lunch. It was upsetting to the other kids who saw it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was still young at the time, but my thought was, all they told him was not to do it. They didn't tell him where he should be throwing rocks at things.
Right.
Right. Because angry throwing rocks at things, that might be useful for you. But so often we don't say to people, oh, that energy is good. We'd like you to do it over here where you can get more skillful about it. We just say, don't do that.
Right.
And then it never gets trained and it just hangs out and becomes a problem.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too profane, but that's the point why there are no people like Sean Connery anymore, because they, don't need, this famous video where he says he wants to slap his wife, when she's like, and Barbara Walters was like all up in arms. But the point is, everybody knew he would do it. And for that reason, he didn't need to do it. Right. And so he was like well aware of, his own masculinity and his own aggression. And therefore he was beyond reproach. He was just, the icon, the cultural icon of masculinity. And that, when you forbid young kids to express that, they become just weaklings, and that's what it is.
What are your regular or favorite internal practices? What do you like to do that you find is spiritually productive?
For me personally, I mean, I do meditation daily. Otherwise, I would go crazy.
And when you say meditation, what kind do you do? What is it like?
Well, I do meditation for 25 years now, and so depending on my internal climate and what is necessary, I need to choose the proper technique. Sometimes it's just breathing. Sometimes it's just a Raja Yoga concentration practice, and at other times it's in a kind of love embrace technique, whatever is necessary at the moment. And then I've writing, which is immensely important, because when I don't do it, I feel like alienated from myself, because I think writing for me is the most close I can get to myself in this world. As doing a practice, then like being in the world, that famous phrase, I'm most myself when I'm writing, that is like a spiritual technique for me in a kind of way. And then podcasting also, it's like, the day can be shitty, but if I have a good conversation, it's just like, where's the wine now? How can I celebrate that?
Yeah, I know. This is what I think of as church.
Right. Yeah. Yes,
like
of course.
These screens are the stained glass windows.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Mm.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about the word parallax. I love the word parallax. And I really liked even Zizek's book, The Parallax View.
Of course.
And for me, it's part of what I call the metaphysics of adjacency, because you have two or more perspectives, and they're not totally separated, but they're not identical either. They sort of overlap, and where they're close to each other, we get the experience of feeling that there's some real thing that they're seeing from different angles. So it's like realness is being produced by the nearness of perspectives. I find that very beautiful, and it's sort of like parallax is fundamental to the structure of the real that falls outside of our narratives. I'm curious.
Beautiful. Can I use that?
Sure, absolutely. I wanted to know what, why you chose that word and what parallax means to you.
No, you just said it. It's amazing.
Well, I guess we're coming close to the end here, as fun as this is. What could, first of all, where can people read some of your books? And second of all, what can people do to help you and your projects move forward?
Oh, well, I mean, at the moment, only one of the books is available in English, the Will to Transcendence. And I mean, while you mentioned parallax, it's cheesy to say, but it's from the people for the people. It's not. I'm just a conduit in a kind of way. And I'm looking for interesting people, and I put this thing out. This is at the moment a complete non-profit thing. Grown out of the goodness out of my heart. No, I'm joking. No, but it's true. It's like because it's just nice to be part of the conversation and to enable people to be part of the conversation. And when people like it, they like it, and when they don't like it, they don't like it. They show it very fast by clicking or by not clicking, and so you have like instant reaction time, or like a reaction time where you can see where you do where you did good stuff or bad stuff, and I hope that people are tuning in. On the website we have like different kind of podcasts and shows there and other stuff coming up, and it's just such a fascinating community we're in, and you must know this. You experience that too. It's just like the people are amazing, like really amazing, and it's like even to try to get to keep up with all of this, to have like the internal representation of where everybody is and what everybody is doing, that's super interesting, and to do the work,
Yeah,
it's karma yoga in a way.
It's so fascinating to me. Like sometimes each time I think I should be spending more time reflecting on the interviews that I've done.
Exactly.
But then I think I can't possibly. Each one of them would take my lifetime.
Exactly.
Also, if anybody's watching this, anybody listening to this, get Sloterdijk to talk to Tom. If you have
exactly.
Him, if you have to threaten him, find Sloterdijk and get him on there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, exactly. That would be great. I talked to his wife. I already, but it's like it wasn't in times of the pandemic, and it couldn't be done at some point.
Well, this is fantastic. What a pleasure to talk with you, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Layman. That is thank you for doing this. You're a great interviewer, really.